All right, folks. Well, we're done with Cincinnati. That was quite a tournament. I got so many comments on that last video. People just unloading on me. So upset that I guess I characterized the match the way I did. I want to explain myself. Let me explain myself. I'll do that a little bit later. We got to get settled in here first. We do have the Winston-Salem Open happening this week, which looks pretty interesting. I think the real big guns are not playing this week, of course. Hey, Farzan, how are you doing? Yes, my name is Aaron Knapp, and I would like to introduce myself to you, Farzan. I know you. We go back a while, buddy. Culture and Sport, what up? How you doing, man? I'm assuming you're a man. I don't like to call women men usually, but let me know if you're a woman, and I'll say, hey, hope you're doing well, woman. That's equally offensive, I know. I'll just shut up about that right now. But listen, you know, Winston-Salem, it looks fairly interesting. We got some interesting players. Obviously not the big guns. Big Three is out of it this week. They're resting up. And Rafael Nadal, let me just say, is going to have extra rest, isn't he? After he won the Rogers Cup, he's going to have a nice 2 weeks before the U.S. Open. Of course, he's the defending champion. I want to talk about the U.S. Open favorites, but you know what? Let me just say something right at the beginning. For those of you who think I'm this crazy Fed fan, I want to tell you that I firmly believe that Roger Federer, if I could pronounce my words correctly, Roger Federer is definitively not the favorite for the U.S. Open, I think, folks. I mean, a couple of reasons for me to conclude, at the very least, that Roger Federer is not a favorite. I think one of the reasons is based on his recent form. We've had a lot of discussions about this. Comment with your views on Federer. I don't want to confine this discussion to Federer, of course, but I do think that his form recently, it's a pattern, folks. When I said it was a bad day at the office in my last video, I meant to say, really, that it was a bad day at the office, but I do say in the video, a lot of you have to, oh, sorry, okay. Let me put it back a little bit. Got some distortion in the audio. Is that better, Piyush? About right here? It's probably. It can't be distorting now. So I'll just stay back from it a little more. But what I did say in that video is that there's a pattern with Federer. No one can deny it. I'm not going to turn away. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to the pattern, folks. There's a pattern. He's not playing the clutch tennis anymore. And it's concerning. It's been enough of a pattern. There's been enough evidence, I think, for us to conclude that, you know, he'll probably do the same thing at the U.S. Open. Well, I'll talk a little bit about Federer. I want to talk about some of the other players as well. But I was going to say, of course, most of you already know this. Of course, Federer has not won the U.S. Open since 2008. Got to the finals in 2009 where he lost to Del Potro. That was a 5-set match. Del Potro wins in 2009, 6-3, 6-7, 6-4, 6-7, 2-6. Excuse me. That's the wrong way to put it. I had it backwards. Federer loses 6-3, 6-7, 6-4, 7-6, 2-6. Del Potro wins 3-6, 7-6, 4-6, 7-6, 6-2. Not that you guys care about that. That's just a score. But kind of got swept up, off of center court there by Del Potro. And then in 2009, what do we have? 2010, Federer is in the semifinals, loses to, and who can you, any of you out there know who Federer loses to in 2010? the U.S. Open. I'm waiting. The first one to get it right will... There you go, Farzan. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it was Djokovic. Oh, thank you, Eric. Or is it Eric? Yeah, I didn't know either, to be honest. If you would have asked me 2 minutes ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you. And then he lost to Djokovic in, 2011 was one of these years for Djokovic. In a way, close behind 2015. He really cleaned up in 2011. Well, in the 2012, he loses to Djokovic in 2011 as well. So it's just Djokovic, he just falling to Djokovic at the U.S. Open for a couple of consecutive years here. And then in the quarterfinals in 2012, he falls to Thomas Berdych, the Birdman, as Matt over at Coffee Break Tennis. I can do my Birdman. Matt does it better. I'll let him do the Birdman. And then, oh goodness, terrible result in 2013. He lost to Tommy Robredo in the round of 16 at the U.S. Open in straight sets. Can't remember what happened there. Was he injured? And then, let's see, in 2014, loses to Cilic in the semifinals. That, of course, was a big match, and he just got crushed by the Croat. I tell you what, Cilic, particularly when you compare him to Federer on the ground game, Cilic was playing quite well in Cincinnati. And, man, he was not taking any malarkey from Djokovic in terms of the pushing. No, Cilic was not. Cilic can be a very aggressive player. And so he was requiring. See, one of the things that I said about Djokovic is that he didn't play a very interesting match on Sunday. I didn't mean to suggest that there's something immutable and permanent and about his game or something definitive about his game that makes him play uninteresting. Not necessarily. I do think, in fact, that Djokovic has another level. He has another gear he can shift into, folks. Federer just didn't require that Djokovic shift into any other higher gears. It was sufficient, and I say this in the video, that credit to Djokovic. He played the match he needed to play to win that match. He didn't do any more, or pretty much not much more than he needed to do, and that's very efficient. So, yeah, AJ, to be quite honest, Nadal, defending champion, Nadal, recent champion at the Rogers Cup, French Open champion, a very impressive run at Wimbledon this year. I have to tell you guys, and I don't know if there's a lot of you out there that know about my evolving views on Rafael Nadal. But, okay, Eric, who do you think, not sure if you'd consider Rafa or Joker to be the biggest favorite? Yeah, probably Djokovic over Nadal. But, well, listen, I did call him a pusher, Stimpy. We're back to Djokovic, and I know you guys want to give me a hard time. Part of why I'm doing this episode is because I wanted to let the air sort of clear a little bit on this Djokovic. Listen, he was doing a lot of pushing on Sunday. If I could confine my claim to the most specific claim that I really intended to make, it was that he was doing some pushing on Sunday, Stimpy boy. Now, that's just the way I saw it. It's, as I just said a few minutes ago, he can do more. He's capable of doing more, and in a way it was Roger's fault that Djokovic didn't do more, because Roger didn't require him to do any more. Well, Luke, good question, man. Chapeau, Tsitsipas, man. I really think that Tsitsipas is a big, big talent. Proven himself very credible and respectable, and respectful on the hard courts. Well, thanks, Stimpy boy. Glad you're still around. Listen, I love Djokovic, and to be quite honest, I've had my problems with Rafael Nadal, but I gained so much respect for the man at Wimbledon this year. I warmed up to Nadal a lot this year at Wimbledon because he did such a great job. And he proved me wrong, really, that he can't perform on grass. I mean, in a way, I think people were concluding he was sort of a lost cause on grass. But you know what? No dice. Rafa put an end to those little rumors, which was really nice. And I just appreciate. It's true. Novak beat him. Stimpy boy, I'm assuming that you are. I'm assuming that you're a Djokovic fan, but yeah, I mean it. Okay, let me check this comment out. Amal K. Federer has a psychological block against Djokovic. He needs a different point of view, says Amal K, to look at the battle. Yeah, I mean, I think he does sort of have a block. He probably does get nervous around Djokovic. I mean, Djokovic has whooped his ass so many times. And listen, folks, I mean, I talked about this a bit in my last episode, but I kind of didn't get very deep into it. I talked about Richard Krajicek. I talked about a lot of people who believe that Djokovic is a better, more complete player than Federer. Yeah, thanks for saying that, Radek. Yeah, your coach, good. I mean, he's really improved outside clay. He modified his game. So that's the thing about Nadal. He played differently on the grass. And that's what warmed me up to him. I was like, this is great. You've actually tailored your game, and it worked too. Well, you're right, Cultura and Sport. Roger fears Rafa in a big way, I think. Although, you could argue that there's less of a block against Rafa given the recent history. I think that he's been able to do a little job on Rafa, at least on the hard courts as it happened. But I do think that Djokovic may, as one of the viewers was mentioning, present a little more of a block for him. But listen, in terms, I won't go through Roger's other fairly disappointing. Of course, he lost to Del Potro last year in the U.S. Open. Roger and Delpo in the U.S. Open don't mix very well. Roger and Djokovic in the U.S. And I say they don't mix well for Fed fans. It's like that's not a, particularly given what Roger has been doing, folks. I think, you know, a clash with Delpo could be pretty devastating. It's from his defeat. Okay, so I got another. Sudharson mentions that maybe there's not a block with respect to Djokovic and Federer, but it's that darn defeat, that frustrating, that devastating defeat at Indian Wells. Oh my God. I got to take my glasses off and just have a sip of coffee just thinking about that. Man, the championship points, psychologically that took its toll, but I think that was where it kind of peaked. But he had been having a hard time. He was last seen in the match against Hyun Chung at, thanks Farzan, my old girlfriend gave me this Starbucks mug. I've had it for, I think, 20 years, to be honest, or close to 20 years. Anyway, we're getting so many good comments. I want to respond to you guys rather than go off on my own thing here. But, Eric, do you see a pattern that whenever Roger seems grumpy and out of sorts, that his level drops considerably? Well, that's another thing. It's a great comment because there was, and I talked about this in my last episode. I mean, there was some talk for a while, and I think I repeated this, what turns out to be not quite an accurate statement, but the statement is that it's good to have Roger grumpy. The grumpy old goat actually wins. And I think that's happened from time to time. But you know what? I think on balance, when you look at Roger's career, I mean, one of the big reasons he broke through originally in 2003 and, you know, was well on his way to becoming the best player of all time, well, it was because he got his emotions under control. There's been a bit of regression lately on that score, and it's important. It really is important. That's part of what's happening. I think it is part of his mental game. He's just getting a bit more emotional these days, but I don't think it's a good thing. He needs to be stolid. He needs to be serene. He needs to be completely within control emotionally, and that's when he'll play best. He needs to play more freely. Correct, Sudarshan. He absolutely needs to. He was just a little tense, a little sort of constrained with Djokovic on Sunday, that's for sure. But again, to repeat, for those of you just tuning in, and we got a couple people on, Roger Federer is definitely not the favorite for the U.S. Open. I think there's really no way around that proposition. First, his form recently does not suggest that he's capable of winning the U.S. Open. Second, he performed in pretty lackluster way in last year's U.S. Open, although those were kind of different circumstances, weren't they? He was coming off of the Wimbledon win. And, yeah, we got some comments on Nadal's contract. I'll write that down. But it's hard to keep all these thoughts in play. But last year was different with respect to Roger's mental state coming into the U.S. Open because he had a lot of confidence. Listen, he did fall in Canada, but that was kind of an injury thing partly. He had a lot of confidence coming into last year's U.S. Open. I mean, if he didn't win it last year, it becomes even less likely that he's going to win it this year. I see a relatively deep run. Yeah, culture and sport, I see what you're saying. You're getting some odds here, yeah. I mean, listen, I think that Novak and Nadal are the two strongest contenders for this title. And if anything, I think I give Nadal a bit of an edge over Djokovic. Here's what separates, on the one hand, Djokovic and Nadal from Federer. At this point in time, to me, right now, both Djokovic and Nadal, and this is an astounding part of their game, are able to basically just turn it on. Through force of will, they're able to win games, break back. I mean, listen, when you break Rafael Nadal's serve, you're in trouble. I've said this before. For most players, when you break their serve, you're actually doing pretty well in the match. No, when you break Rafa's serve, you're in trouble because he's going to come storming back. I don't know what his percentage, if anyone knows this percentage, I think this could be an interesting number. I need to look this up. But the percentage of times that Rafa is able to immediately break back upon. All right, let me know when that happens. I should be reconnecting. Should be reconnecting now. Well, yes, we're back. So both Rafa and Djokovic, they can just break back. How do they do that? It's a force of will. They decide, I will win this game. Excuse me. I will win this next game. You're going to break me, I'm going to break you back. And they just do it. It's now Roger has been able to do that. Sorry, bad noise in terms of what? In terms of the vocal microphone and just in terms of the distortion. All right. I think this mic is, all right. They just have that ability, folks. And that is precisely the ability that Roger seems to be lacking. Roger can't come up with that. He can't come up with that very intense force of will that Djokovic can generate, that he did in the match with Raonic, that, again, Nadal does it in virtually every match. I mean, these guys get broken. Their serve is not impenetrable. They get broken. I said during the course of the match on Sunday night, and this is after Djokovic took the first set, and I think he was a break-up or he was playing really strongly in the second, and I tweeted, you can check, I said, I would be surprised if Djokovic does not get broken in this match. I still thought he was going to win, but I would be surprised. And of course, Roger did break him. And about the only thing good you can say about Roger Federer in terms of his numbers in that match is that he had a 100% breakpoint conversion rate. He had one breakpoint and converted it. So that was pretty interesting. But he is not capable of, and that's right, they're some of the best returns. So it comes back down to that return game. They can get broken. See, Roger, a lot more with Roger rests on his serve. He's not a serve bot, but there's a lot more of Roger's game that rests on the serve. And I was getting some comments from people in response to that match that that really is the problem. Since Djokovic applies this pressure to Roger's serve, he suffocates. Roger suffocates. He doesn't have that kind of dependable part of his game, and he was really dependable at Cincinnati. Remember, he went 100 straight consecutive games at Cincinnati holding serve. And then to watch him get broken on Sunday, it was just devastating. Listen, credit to Djokovic. I mean, it just affirms his status as the most tremendous, the greatest returner of all time, possibly. But Nadal has that returning capability as well. And that really is why both of them are able to get under the skin of the great Roger Federer. Well, that leaves open the question of Del Potro. Del Potro does not have a reputation for a very fine return game. I think he does. He's a capable returner, but it does beg the question. How does Del Potro beat Roger? It's not really through the return game. Yeah, Farzan, it's a bit sad. Thanks, Stimpy Boy. This is some modern art behind me. LSB 51 first serves at the point I checked out, worst he's had all year. Yeah, he wasn't landing many first serves, but a lot more of Roger's game, obviously. Listen, he's not a serve. I think you have Roger haters that will call him a serve bot, but I think the credible proposition is that he is a player whose game relies very substantially on his serve, and he's got a great serve. That's the thing. You got to give him credit, serve bot or not serve bot. I mean, he's got a better serve than either Rafa or Djokovic, and that's the truth. But he's not able to dig deep on these return games. His conversion rate is very low, of course, but the conversion rate is not such a problem with Djokovic. Djokovic doesn't have a great conversion rate either, but he just creates so many break points that he doesn't have to convert many of them in order to win matches and break back. Yeah, Del Potro, very strong forehand, obviously. Yeah, and that can then give Roger some problems. What's going on with Thiem? I don't know. He withdrew, apparently, was it from Cincinnati? He lost at the Rogers Cup. Remind me if that's wrong, but he seems to be on Twitter. Thiem seems to be confident and ready for the U.S. Open. Thiem is just... I love Domi. I call him Domi. I love Dominique Thiem. I love to watch him play, but he is just not a consistent player. Certainly not at the level of a Rafa Nadal. Certainly not at the level of a Novak Djokovic. And really, I'm not sure he's even playing as consistently as Tsitsipas. Yeah, he lost to Tsitsipas, which was nice to see. Although, I don't like it when they pit the one-handers. A couple of you are probably going to give me a hard time about this. I don't like it when they pit the one-handers against each other early in the tournaments. Wish there was some way to sort of account for that, so that, there's more chance for the one-handers to come through since they're in such a minority. But, yes, Tsitsipas, let's see. Eric says, supposedly Roger practiced with Wilson balls in New York before Cincinnati. Wasn't able to adapt to pin balls. Huh, interesting. Maybe it was the ball. The balls can have an effect. All of these things do have Sasha is unable to break through as well. Yes, he has shown a lot of promise. Uh, but Zverev, your dark horse, B-Dog. Well, I think that you're talking about for the U.S. Open. If you're talking about for the U.S. Open, I don't know about that. A dark horse at the U.S. Open would be more like, I think, at this point, I could see someone like Wawrinka being a dark horse at the U.S. Open. Let me know what you think of that proposition. I also think that we might see Tsitsipas do quite well. The other kind of quantity that we know something about at the U.S. Open, I'm not entirely sure what the results have been, but John Isner, remember, who performs very well on this surface and has been pretty much playing the best tennis of his career lately. So those are a couple of the dark horses, I think, for the U.S. Open. But Roger's not a favorite at all. It's Rafa. It's, to be quite honest, Rafa, again, Nadal and Djokovic are at the top. But you do have Del Potro. Del Potro could surprise us all. There's also Kevin Anderson. Now, I don't know of a lot of players that get real excited about Kevin Anderson. I've had some comments to the effect that folks actually don't like Kevin Anderson. Lendl's going to make a big difference. Yes, good point. Good point. Patrick Nelson, Wawrinka will have a great chance for a great run. He's probably played the best tennis in Cincinnati since his comeback. I agree completely. He played very well against Roger. As I said in my last video, in that last set, actually Wawrinka's level of play didn't change at all, and it was Roger that kind of was able to, dig down deep in that last set of the two match day that he had, and was able to kind of bring it out. But man, that was just a very slight glimmer, and we really have seen not much of that dynamic from Roger at all. But that was a glimmer of hope for the people that want to believe that Roger has a chance in New York this year. Raonic, of course, Raonic, B-Dog. Good point. Listen, I watched the Djokovic-Raonic match in Cincinnati. Was fantastic. Remember, that went 3 sets. Raonic was just cleaning up. I mean, he reminds me, I think Cilic and Raonic are really kind of cut from the same cloth, but he was playing very well and dictating play a lot better than Roger could against Djokovic. Yeah, I agree, Stan the man. I love Stan. I love that he's just been working so hard. It's taken so long. It's good to see him doing well again. Yeah, Raonic. I mean, some people have a personality thing with Raonic. He's kind of got the cartoon hair or whatever. But in terms of like playing ability, he is capable. In terms of the speed of the U.S. Open courts, I got a comment about that. I think that it's quite possible that, my understanding is that the U.S. Open courts are pretty slow. My understanding is that they're probably not quite as slow. Let me know if you have the court speed index. I don't think I have figures on the U.S. Open court speed index. I'm not sure if they release them, but I don't think it's quite as slow as Indian Wells. I think it will be a little slower than Cincinnati was. Now, Cincinnati, and let me know, I'd be interested in what you guys have heard on this. Did you see any interviews with players in Cincinnati where they commented on the court speed? It really seemed to be playing quite fast on those courts. But I do think that the U.S. Open courts could be slightly. They'll probably be slower than Cincy, but quicker than Indian Wells. I think that's probably one of the reasons why Federer has not done great in New York, because they've been slowing them down for pretty much the last decade. But maybe they'll change them. Listen, these tournaments change. They change the courts, and sometimes it's some kind of backroom dealing that results in the change. I mean, maybe someone in the back room wants to. Federer is a big money maker, so maybe someone in the back room wants to give Federer a chance, wants to give Federer a little bit of an advantage. So maybe take a little bit of that sand off the surface of those hard courts in New York and speed them up a little bit. But I think, that's obviously a factor. Djokovic tends to do a little better on the slower surfaces. But again, I mean, he's kind of great on all of the surfaces when it comes right down to it. But yeah, I mean, listen, I think we're going to. A couple of you have said in the comments that we might see something to the effect of a dark horse, some new star coming in and upsetting and winning the U.S. Open. It could happen. It definitely could happen. I see someone like Tsitsipas probably capable of doing that. At least he's shown that. It's just the problem with Tsitsipas is that he just doesn't have the consistency quite yet, which. It's kind of it's just something that's going to come with age. And then there's Shapovalov. Now, Patrick, or if it's Patrick, if you have any questions about Shapo, there was a pretty good run by Shapo in these last couple of hard court tournaments. He has performed well at the U.S. Open in the past, last year in particular. So I believe, or was that in... Again, he tends to do better in the warm-up tournaments at the U.S. Open. I can't recall what Shapo did at the U.S. Open last year. Let me know if you know that. Fourth round last year, yeah. He's capable. I love his play as well, although I think emotionally he's got some things to deal with in terms of his temperament in a way that possibly Tsitsipas does not. Tsitsipas has a nice, even psychological keel, which is part of why I think he has so much promise. Another reason is because he's just he's got that big frame. He's 6'4". He's quite massive. But yeah, I mean, those are the favorites, but I think, listen, it could be a great tournament. What I recognized at Cincinnati was how great the tennis is. That we're witnessing right now. And heck, Rafael Nadal wasn't even in the tournament, but we had some fantastic matches in Cincinnati. So I think that even without Federer being, a favorite, I think we're going to see some great Federer tennis. Don't get me wrong, folks. We're going to see some great Federer tennis for you Fed fans. But it's probably just not going to be very... an extended run of Federer tennis. But again, let me go back to Federer because he had it was a whole different context and situation coming into last year's U.S. Open. He's got something to prove this year, doesn't he? Something is wrong and he kind of wants to redeem. So I'm interested to see what he could possibly do, in connection with a kind of just roaring back and kind of showing the world that he can do it again. Because at this point, there's no expectations for Federer. You see, there is a small possibility, a very small possibility, that the total release of pressure off of Federer's shoulders, the total release of pressure after Cincinnati, will produce benefits. He's not the favorite. He's got nothing to worry about. It's no pressure. He needs to relax. AJ, you hope Fed loses early? You must be trying to get me back for your perception that I wanted Rafael Nadal to lose in the clay season. Listen, yeah, why do you hope Fed loses early, AJ? Please explain yourself. I'm interested in this. Why do you want Fed to lose early? I explained myself with Rafa, although people misconstrued. Man, yeah. Djokovic Nadal quarterfinal. That could be right. Djokovic feeds on the high expectations. Well, possibly. I think they go through phases. I think there's been times when Roger has fed on the pressure, fed on the high expectations. I believe that he's been able to use that at certain points of his career. Yeah, Farzan, I'm going to actually be doing a lot more live stuff because I want to like interact with you guys. So yeah, I'll do the draw live when it comes out. I think it's going to be Thursday. I think tomorrow. Or actually, no, maybe it's going to be Saturday. So I went a little too far with the Rafa. Oh, yes, of course. I know what you're talking about, LSB. Yeah, well, but I'm still asking. I asked a couple of people. Thanks, Patrick. I look forward to seeing you. But I'm interested in why they want Federer to go out early. Listen, if I had to predict something, I would say Federer quarterfinal, semifinal run. He could be there in the final. He could be there in the final without question. But to my mind, it's probably more like a quarterfinal. But just kind of like last year. But I will say this. He's coming in with a different set of circumstances. It's a different set of circumstances. I mean, last year, again, he was just riding high, He was over the moon last year. Australian Open champion, Wimbledon champion. He had really nothing to prove coming into the U.S. Open. This year, he did win the Australian, and that was mind-blowingly good. But he's got something to prove. There are no expectations. There's no pressure. And so maybe he'll just relax. Maybe he'll relax and he will perform better. So it could just without all the pressure, without all the expectations. And maybe, you never know. You just never know. It depends on how the draw comes out, who he has to face. But, and you could see some upsets where he could find a line through this draw without having to face Djokovic and Nadal. Both Djokovic and Nadal are capable of getting upset at the U.S. Open without question. Behind Djokovic and Nadal, I would put Delpo, again, in the third spot in terms of a favorite. But there's also David Goffin that I wanted to talk a little bit about. I loved watching David Goffin last week in Cincinnati. Let me know what you think. Did you see a couple of Goffin's matches? And it was kind of a shame that he retired with Federer because they were playing. It was a great match that was, on getting served up there between Federer and Goffin. It was in no way a foregone conclusion that Federer would win this match, given how well Goffin was playing. Divine David, he is a bit divine, isn't he? And he just, he seems like a good man, a good person, but most importantly, playing some beautiful tennis, accurate, consistent. The depth on the ground strokes, very impressive, but the placement was, again, it might be the best I've seen him play. I'm sure he's played well. He's beaten Federer before. He beat him last year at the ATP final. So, but Goffin is up there too. What was the statistic that I was reading? Well, so far on hard courts, so far this year on hard courts, David Goffin has the best second serve return percentage and points won. He is on top on hard courts so far this year. Now, granted, there hasn't been that many tournaments there's been quite a few tournaments on hard courts. Played 18 matches, and he has the best percentage on the second serve return points. So that's a very interesting statistic. Again, that's the way to get under Federer's skin, guys. It's the return game, and that's why we have these great rivals. If anything, Djokovic and Nadal are kind of in the same basket. So, in a way, a Djokovic versus Nadal match or final might be less interesting. Goffin is a great guy. You want me to give an example of a great guy? Well, I suppose it's just the absence of what he does. He's very cool on court. He seems very respectful. I have seen him interviewed a bit. I don't think he speaks English terribly well, as I recall, but he mostly I'm interested in his play, not his personality. But they call him Divine David. I think the women think he's very handsome. And as I said, in Cincinnati, he was playing some devastating tennis. Devastating. Crazy good. But so with Federer, there's a small chance that the different circumstances this year could produce a deeper run than okay, his tennis is divine. Okay, I don't know. I didn't come up with the Divine David. Who came up with Divine David? Did you invent that term, LSB? Yes, defeated Kevin Anderson. True. Defeated Del Potro as well. Man, that was a close match. Woo! Great match to watch. Well, so Rafa's contract, you made it up, LSB. Well, I've seen it used a couple of times. Maybe it's all been by you. I think I've seen at least one other person use it, so I think you may be starting trends. Well, in terms of Rafa's contract expiring, I mean, has there been some news on what he intends to do? I mean, I don't think that. I mean, listen. Part of the issue with Roger and Nike, and you're probably going to criticize me for segueing into Divine David, French pronunciation. Okay, we have to say Divine David. But part of the thing with Roger and Nike was that Roger's getting older, folks. But the other problem with Nike is, and this applies equally to Rafa, by the way, it's 4:45 in Boston, Farzone, which is that Nike is very overextended. It's got LeBron James, and it really has a lot of money extended into Michael Jordan. And I just think that the coffers maybe weren't quite deep enough to match Uniqlo. So that possibly could be one reason why Rafa will think again about re-signing with Nike if they can't offer up a pretty penny to him, or if he's going to make a demand. See, that's the difference. Roger made demands. He had an offer from another company, and he made demands on Nike. And all Nike did was say, we can't meet your demands. So the question about Rafa is, will he make demands? So do you guys have any evidence that Rafa's going to be making demands on Nike? So we could make an inference about that, because if Rafa is still the world number one, if he's still winning Grand Slams, if he's still winning the French Open, the Federer example suggests that Rafa, heck, if Federer can go to 37, why can't Rafa? So Nike might conclude that Rafa is worth more money than Federer. Let me know what you think about that proposition. I was looking on Twitter the other day, folks, and correct me if I'm wrong. Rafa Nadal has more followers than Roger Federer. I think about 3 million more followers than Roger Federer. I found that surprising. You would have thought that Roger would, but no, it's Rafa Nadal. And I think I would be willing to wager that that's got to be the most followers that any tennis athlete has. But who knows? I'm not sure. But so with respect to Nadal, yeah, it all depends on whether he's going to be making demands on Nike. It's possible he could be worth more to Nike than Roger was because, well, I had a question the other day from a commenter, and they asked me, and I think this is the way it was phrased. It was basically, at this point in time, Who do you think is a better player, Roger or Rafa? And I can't avoid the conclusion that right now Rafa is just a more consistent, he's a more dependable, and really, I mean, he's got that force of will. He can turn it around, he can break back, but he also and so responds well under pressure, in other words. But he's just such a more consistent player than Roger has shown himself to be over the last, say, I guess it's been about 6 or 7 months now. It is weird. Nadal is more popular. I mean, I think maybe it's just it's all the Spaniards or the Spanish-speaking countries. I'm not sure, but I that was great to see that he has so many followers. Well, again, the thing about Rafa coming into the U.S. Open, and one reason why he could do quite well, folks. He could defend this title very easily. It's one possible result, and it's the fact that he's got 2 weeks rest. 2 weeks rest under Rafa's belt. Wow. Well, Federer, I think Federer is ultimately more popular, possibly, but it's not reflected in the Twitter followers. It's true. I was surprised to find, and it's not just a marginal amount. I think it's like 3 million Twitter followers. But let me know. I think that I recall, unless something has changed. I just checked it a couple of days ago. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think Rafa's got a lot of fans on Twitter. I mean, you'd think if Federer had more fans, he'd come onto Twitter and kind of boost up that follower count. But Twitter fans are not tennis fans. True enough. I mean, listen, folks. I was watching some great tennis in Cincinnati. I tell you that was some fantastic. I had a great time watching that tournament this year. But I will say, the attendance was not very impressive. One of the problems, of course, is they have the men's and the women's divided up. I can't watch unless I buy a subscription to to the Women's Association or the women's video streaming. I can't even watch the women. Obviously, it doesn't come with ATP, so it requires 2 different subscriptions. And somehow a way to kind of bring this all together so we could kind of capitalize on the support there is out there for tennis. But we're having some comebacks. I mean, I've noticed from the comments on Twitter, I mean, the complexion of the Twitter audience changes, I've kind of noticed since I've been doing this channel. And obviously, with certain time periods when Roger Federer was doing really well, first couple of months of this year into Rotterdam, there was a lot of Federer people. But, it does kind of follow the champions in a way. And I think that people are now starting to look a lot closer at Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal. Well, people have been looking closely at Rafa Nadal for a while. I mean, he's been just kind of really playing his best tennis in a way the last couple of years, but and he shows no signs of stopping. But now Djokovic seems to be turning it on, and now Djokovic may very well follow through on all the promise that he had and demonstrated in 2015, in 2011, all through the intervening years also in a way. But now just imagine this scenario. Imagine this scenario for a second. Djokovic wins the U.S. Open and the Australian Open. And you know what? He's pretty much the king of Australia. Well, he and Federer are the 2 kings of Australia, but of Melbourne. But I do think that if he wins the U.S. Open, if Djokovic wins the U.S. Open, he's probably going to win the Australian Open. And he might win the Australian Open either way. And then you've got an issue. Because if he wins the Australian Open, then he's going to be 0. And then let's say he picks up, one in California. Maybe does the Sunshine Double. I don't know. But if that happens, then he's going to be zeroing in on that French Open. And can you imagine now, imagine that scenario. Novak Djokovic wins the U.S. Open, Australian Open, and the French Open to get the slam, the true slam, for the second time. Folks, what does that do to the GOAT debate? I know, LSB. We have to face these possibilities. It is. It's well, it is. It's not. I don't know. It depends on how Djokovic does it. If he does it the way he did it on Sunday, maybe that would be kind of a strange scenario. But I do think that if that happened, man, we would have some talking to do. That, to me, would ignite a GOAT debate. I'm sorry. I love Roger. But if Djokovic can win 4 in a row again for the second time with Roger Federer playing, with Rafael Nadal playing, with all of these people active, good God, that would be very interesting. Now, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, he's capable of doing it. Obviously, he did it once. But I do think, listen, folks, according to a whole different set of statistics, you could argue that Federer would still be the GOAT even if Djokovic did that. And that's true. But I do think Djokovic, at the very least, I think Djokovic, based on that result, assuming he were to do that, I think that would justify including Djokovic in the GOAT discussion. Definitely, without question. I mean, I think a lot of people would include him either way. Sorry, I know. The Fed fans are going a little crazy with this scenario. I won't talk about that scenario anymore. Why can't other players win slams? Well, it is sort of sad in a way. I mean, I haven't done a full analysis of historically what has happened here. Listen, there have always been players at the top that predominate at these Grand Slams. At any given time, there's a group of players who predominate. But, of course, with the big three, this age of the big three that we're still in, apparently, and for a while we weren't in the big three, and then now we are back into the age of the big three in many respects. But, I mean, I just think it has to do with the experience, the superior experience of the players that are in the big three. I mean, how can you contend against players with so much Grand Slam experience under their belts? It really is hard to contend with. And we do have some upstarts, however, folks, and Tsitsipas is one of them. I think he's a fantastic example. There is Delpo, there is Cilic. They're getting a little bit old, of course, but you do have Shapo. I mean, it's all same old names in a way. Will they be able to break through? Will Alexander Zverev? I mean, he's the one, really. He's kind of the one with the most promise in terms of the verifiable results, right? Zverev, now he had a fairly good run. He's getting better results at the Grand Slams. He has struggled with the Grand Slams. He'll probably do better in the Davis Cup. I don't know if you guys have been following this Davis Cup. Of course you have. Most of you are you're tennis freaks, tennis experts. But he'll probably like the Davis Cup, best of three, which will kind of be a little more suited to his style. What happened to Hyun Chung? What happened? Good question, Amalke. He was another guy. Well, I don't have a lot of faith in Chung at this point. He's just not been performing really well. He just had that tremendous run at the Australian and then a few fairly good runs thereafter. But thereafter, but he really has kind of fallen off to some degree. Meanwhile, kind of Zverev came out of the woodwork. But no, back to Zverev. I mean, listen, he is the one that, in terms of verifiable results, in terms of kind of a verifiable record that could support the proposition that he might pull a big upset and win the U.S. Open. I mean, he sort of has that. Thanks, Liam. Nice to have you. I think he does have that. He's got some results under his belt. So I think he's the younger guy that's most likely to pull an upset. But even so, I think it's not very likely with him. He doesn't seem able to perform well in these longer matches, the 5-set match. Of course, now he's got more experience. Of course, was it in the French Open that he had to play all those 5-set matches? I mean, he had a couple of tournaments where he was just going 5-set match after 5-set match after 5-set match. So the experience will do him well. Of course, my little guilty pleasure is his brother, Misha Zverev, who, when he plays well, is a lot of fun to watch. I just like Misha Zverev because he's got balls of steel. I don't know how you play like that, but you know, it's very exciting to watch. But I do think that, listen, AJ Tsitsi is going to win a Grand Slam. Mark my words. I've said this on Twitter. It's all documented. He will be a world number one, and he will win. He definitely will win Grand Slams, and he definitely will be a world number one, in my opinion. Kevin says, I don't think that Zverev is ready for the big league as yet. He lacks concentration. Well, I mean, I think he showed that he's got some ability to concentrate. But I do think you're right. That's part of the problem with Zverev. Liam Vassar saying the Joker is the U.S. Open favorite. I think generally, I'm not going to stand up and object to that. I said earlier that to me, Nadal is the favorite for a couple of reasons. First, he's a defending champion. Second of all, he's got 2 weeks of rest coming into the U.S. Open. And I just like Nadal a little bit in terms of winning the U.S. Open. But, yeah, how can anyone not like Tsitsipas? That's true. Tsitsipas is a lovable player. He really does fantastic. I mean, listen, love watching him play. I've been a huge fan of Tsitsipas for months now. Question: why does Roger only win Grand Slam since 2008 when the latest best is injured? Why does Roger only win Grand Slams when the other... I think what he's saying, Travis, is why does Roger win Grand Slams only when his main competitors are injured? Well, that is it. If I've read the question correctly, I don't agree with the premise. I'm not sure you could say that he won the Australian Open in 2017 without his competitors there, because Rafael Nadal was there and he beat him in a 5-set match. And in fact, that was a pretty tough draw that Federer had coming through. Of course, Djokovic wasn't there, and he hasn't had to deal with Djokovic in a very competitive way. And this gets back to the point about this match between Federer and Djokovic at Cincinnati being significant. It was not interesting. I personally didn't find it to be a very interesting and exciting match to watch. Nothing against Djokovic, folks. I just didn't find it to be a real interesting match. But I do think it holds significance, because think about it. You've got all the Djokovic fans who believe Djokovic is the better player. They were saying before Cincinnati that the reason why Roger did well in 2017 was because Djokovic was out. Well, now they have some fodder, as I said in my last video, to work with. They can say, right at the point when Djokovic was, came back and was standing on the other side of the court against the great Federer, right at that point where they came together again after a couple of years of not playing at all, that Roger just foundered and Djokovic cleaned up. And that is basically what happened. So the Djokovic people have the Richard Krajiceks of the world and a few others who believe that Djokovic is just they like to use that phrase, a more complete player, a better player ultimately than Federer. It really does have significance, and it tends to undermine, and I don't necessarily think so because, again, Roger had to deal with Rafa in 2017, and Rafa was playing fantastically in 2000. It was one of his best years, you could argue. So he had competition. There's always competition. I mean, if one guy is out, of course, Wawrinka was out as well, and then Andy Murray was out. So, but those two weren't big threats to Roger. It was Djokovic being out. So the argument is that the Djokovic fans will argue that it was only because Roger didn't have to deal with Djokovic that he was able to do so well in 2017. And in the beginning of 2018, of course, he didn't have to play Djokovic in the 2018 Aussie Open. And again, they haven't played in years, been a few years, and this was the first time since Federer's comeback that they actually played. It was a very significant match in light of that context about the differing opinions on Djokovic versus Federer and why Federer did so well in 2017, but then also why the Djokovic fans believe he's better. I mean, the only saving grace for Federer fans there is that he just sucked. He just sucked on Sunday. I mean, listen, you watch the match again, and all right, LSB saying he was playing poorly at Cincy. It has nothing to do with Djokovic. Djokovic was a tough match for him given he was playing so badly. Yeah, I mean, listen, he was just not playing very well. So that's the one saving grace for Fed fans in terms of Djokovic's impact on whether Federer had a legitimately good year in 2017, and then also whether Djokovic is a better or more complete player. Yeah, I mean, listen, you can make that argument, but that's in terms of Eric Hansen is arguing that Novak wouldn't have beat Roger at the AO or Wimbledon in 2017, and given how Roger was playing, I think you can make the argument. Unfortunately, that's kind of an abstract argument, and the people for Djokovic will just point to the concrete match in Cincinnati. They'll say, well, you can argue all about what would have happened, but look at what happened in Cincinnati. Now, listen, the Joker fans, Connie, I agree, he hasn't played his best all year, possibly. I mean, the Australian Open was pretty darn good. I don't have too many complaints about that performance. It was efficient. I think in the beginning of the Australian Open, basically straight through the final, people were a little concerned. They weren't seeing those neo backhands or whatever. And I remember saying on this channel that, no, he's just playing efficiently. He's not doing any more than he needs to do. He was coming through the matches, most of them in straight sets, as I remember. But all right, so now we've got Aleska who's taking me to task. If you watch the history of Novak versus Roger, you don't know nothing. Well, I don't know nothing. I don't know anything. Okay, Novak won an all-important match against Roger at the U.S. Open. You just tuned in fact. I mentioned that match. I mentioned just earlier in this live stream the extent to which Djokovic has dominated Federer at the U.S. Open. So before you say I don't know anything, please watch the whole live stream. No, I'm not defending Federer. I'm kind of laying out the argument. Well, some people have trouble seeing the nuance in my arguments, but dude, I love your guy Djokovic. Don't worry. I want him to do well. Again, for those of you tuning in, my claim about Djokovic You and I need to clarify here. My claim about, first of all, go back and watch my Wimbledon victory video on Djokovic, where I've paid him so many high compliments. And I've made a couple of videos on Cincinnati, too, before the final. I've given Djokovic so many compliments. I know how many very impressive records. I know that he's kicked Roger's ass many times, very convincingly. I know. I know what's happening. I know the history. What I was saying about the match on Sunday is he didn't need to play very well. And in fact, in his defense, I think he had another gear to shift to. He had another gift. I'm reading these and doing things. Someone just gave me a gift. He didn't need to kick into gear. So that was the point. Roger didn't require him to play up to the level he's capable of playing. If Roger had been playing well, it still would have been it would have been a much better match for a couple of reasons. First, Roger would have been playing well, but second, Djokovic would have been playing well because again, he had another gear. So if Roger was just doing a lot better, again, the unforced errors were just inexcusable with him, and not all of them. I mean, the Djokovic fans will argue that it was just the Djokovic pressure that Roger couldn't deal with, but I do think ultimately that Roger was having a bad day. Listen, Djokovic has another level. If Federer had been playing well, had been slaying on Sunday, Djokovic still could have won. Now consider that proposition for you folks who think I'm a crazy Fed fan or Fedtard. Fedtard, that tends to be the word that comes up. I'm a Fedtard. I have stated so many times that I love tennis. I love the game, and the game transcends Federer. That's the truth. I have opinions on. I have preferred styles of play. I like the one-handed backhand. You guys know that. I like players that use the whole court. I like players that think through points, that kind of construct points in logical ways, rather than, well, there are different approaches. I don't want to blame anybody or try to accuse other players for having different approaches. And let me say also that, in fact, most of the players don't have a one-handed backhand. But with respect to point construction, I mean, that was essentially what I was talking about in the match on Sunday. Point construction. Djokovic's point construction was not very interesting and impressive to me. That was really the point, and I wish I could have said it over. Now, of course, Djokovic fans are going to hate me for saying even that, but it's not an insult. It's just that, again, back to the same point. Roger didn't require that Djokovic come up with masterful point construction. Djokovic realized very early on that he didn't have to do anything too brilliant. And if you don't have to do anything too brilliant, why risk it? Djokovic took basically a risk. Djokovic didn't take any risks. He didn't need to, and so he didn't take them. If you don't need to, because in order to play masterfully, in order to play like the turbo Djokovic, you got to take risks. You got to be up against a serious contender. You got to have Nadal breathing down your neck. That's when Djokovic will come alive and start constructing some points. Roger Federer really didn't require that Djokovic do that. But again, doing some more of those, more point construction, more thoughtful point construction, more affirmative, offensive play requires more risks, if you ask me. And then I think that you've got a whole set of exposures that you don't necessarily need. Djokovic decided, Why expose myself? I'm going to play an easy match because that's all Roger's requiring me to do. And that, in fact, let me compliment. And my last video, I complimented Djokovic. I said, good play, Novak. That was exactly what you needed to do. Why overplay it? Why take risks that you don't need to take? He didn't need to do that. He realized it. He's been doing this for long enough that he realized it. So I thought that was very commendable for Novak Djokovic, the way he played. So let me repeat. It's a very nuanced claim, folks. I think it was uninteresting. I think it was unimaginative on the part of Djokovic. Mainly, there were flashes of brilliance. But on the other hand, I think that was the right approach to take, and he's smart. And again, as I said on Twitter, he deserves the honor. He deserved the match. He is the champion. He was the better player on the court. So I don't know what to tell you about Djokovic, but I think it was in response to Liam, I don't see him as quite the favorite. He does have kind of that upward trajectory that's kind of working in his balance, but let's see what's going on here. Yeah, I'm okay. And that's really, maybe I'm just kind of repeating the obvious. It's just sort of obvious. That's the way he plays. But there are degrees of it. And sometimes Djokovic can turn out some really fantastic matches. I thought the match against Nadal, for example, at Wimbledon was quite good. That might have been one of the best matches played in the course of the year, unless you're so partial to Federer. You could probably put Federer-Cilic, the Federer-Cilic final and the Aussie Open up there as well. Maybe there are a couple things on clay. Then there was those sort of nightmares at Wimbledon. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Liam. There are a lot of people that believe that Federer is the GOAT because of who he is and because of the extent to which he's loved by the world. Although, Liam, I mentioned before, am I stalling out now? Let me see. All right, sorry. Well, we got a bad feed, but I think it's back now. My camera battery is about to run out, so I think the favorites have to be. It's got to be Rafa. First, I think Djokovic is probably the second favorite. Then you have Delpo that you got to put in there at third, I believe. But Federer's in there. I see a somewhat impressive run, possibly. I think the circumstances are different enough for him to possibly surprise us. Different enough from last year, to possibly surprise us at the U.S. Open. But given his recent history at the U.S. Open, folks, it doesn't look good. He hasn't won it and been about a decade since he's won the tournament. So you can't put Federer as a favorite. In terms of some dark horses, I do think you have Wawrinka and Tsitsipas as possible dark horses. But then you've got Goffin. Goffin was playing wonderfully in Cincinnati, and I was saying that he will possibly do a great job in New York as well. So, listen, I am going to have to probably sign off. I've been on for well over an hour now, so we've done an hour. Maybe I'll come back a little later tonight, or probably do another little live thing tomorrow. Yeah, thanks, Liam. Thanks for coming, but it was great to have you guys. Let's keep talking. There's a lot to talk about, even though Federer is not, in fact, the favorite. We do have tons of tons of possibilities, certainly. And Goffin is actually the one that I want to talk more about. So let's see, Connie. He might have won it for 10 years, but he's won the two final. I'm sorry, you're not. I don't know what you're responding to. Thanks, Patrick. I'd be interested. Yeah, I want to do more of the live stuff because there's just stuff. It's so much. It's so much more immediate. Yeah, I'll definitely do a live show when the draw comes out. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but I have 2 kids, and see you later culture, and so sometimes I get a little tied up, but I will be very free this week and the beginning of next. But in general, I'm going to try to get a lot more of these live streams going so we can get kind of a live conversation happening. And also, we can kind of explain ourselves in real time so there's not much of a, I don't know, sometimes there's a block in the comments. I try to make a comment and then things get lost, and it's better to kind of be live so I can answer your questions directly. But yeah, I saw a note here about Cecchinato. Would love to see Cecchinato do well, but when will Nick Kyrgios grow up? Good question, man. Good question. Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, thanks, Travis. Well, I am going to sign off for now, folks. It's been great talking with you. Leave more comments if you want to. I will probably be back tomorrow around this time with some more chat and talk. Great to see you guys, and I'm going to sign off. Bye-bye.